love the Ravens as much as we do, then smash that subscribe button and stay locked in with Flock News for all the drama, updates, and excitement all season long. The whispers started quietly, almost like background noise in the league. But they grew louder with every passing hour as people around the Browns organization began to realize that something was slipping through their fingers. SHEDEUR Sanders, a name that already carried weight before a single professional snap, was suddenly being spoken about as if he had already outgrown Cleveland without ever truly belonging to it from the outside. It looked like confidence, but inside league circles the word most often repeated was humiliation. Not the loud, viral kind, but the subtle type that stings executives and scouts who thought they had leverage. The idea floating around was that SHEDEUR never truly bought into the Browns' vision, and every interaction reinforced that belief. His camp allegedly felt disrespected, underestimated, and boxed into a narrative that did not match how he saw himself. As this rumor spread, it painted a picture of a young quarterback who felt he was being evaluated through fear rather than imagination. The Browns, known for cautious moves and internal doubts, seemed to hesitate at the worst possible moment. In a league where conviction matters more than comfort, that hesitation became symbolic. People started saying that SHEDEUR used meetings, interviews, and silence as tools, forcing Cleveland to reveal its uncertainty. By the time the smoke cleared, the story circulating was brutal. The Browns did not lose SHEDEUR on talent. They lost him on belief. That, according to insiders, is the kind of humiliation that echoes long after the paperwork is signed somewhere else. As the narrative continued to grow, attention shifted quickly toward Baltimore, a franchise known for decisiveness and a strong internal identity. The Ravens, according to league chatter, did not approach SHEDEUR Sanders like a risky investment or a developmental project. Instead, they treated him like a long-term vision. This difference in tone supposedly changed everything. Where Cleveland allegedly questioned fit and readiness, Baltimore spoke about evolution, adaptability, and future dominance. People close to the situation suggested that SHEDEUR felt seen there, not just as a quarterback, but as a leader who could eventually redefine how the offense moves and breathes. The rumor suggests that conversations were less about limitations and more about possibilities. And that kind of dialogue can be intoxicating for a young player, with legacy pressure already on his shoulders. In this speculative retelling, the Ravens sold a culture rather than a depth chart, emphasizing patience mixed with ambition. SHEDEUR, in turn, was said to respond with maturity and strategic silence, letting the Browns wait while Baltimore quietly built trust. Observers began framing it as a chess match rather than a negotiation. With the Ravens always one move ahead, the word humiliation returned, because Cleveland allegedly watched this unfold without the ability to counter it. The idea that SHEDEUR would commit for seasons to Baltimore became less shocking and more inevitable as the rumor matured. To many fans, it felt like the Ravens did not steal SHEDEUR. They simply offered him a future that Cleveland could not convincingly describe. From a storytelling perspective, this rumor hits deeper because it challenges long-held assumptions about power in the draft process. Traditionally, teams believe prospects need them more than the other way around. In this speculative saga, SHEDEUR Sanders flipped that dynamic. The Browns, according to the narrative, expected gratitude and compliance, but instead were met with distance and calculation. Every delayed response, every carefully chosen word was interpreted as quiet defiance. Analysts began suggesting that SHEDEUR's approach was intentional, designed to expose which franchises truly understood modern quarterback leadership. Baltimore, with its reputation for stability, allegedly passed that test without forcing it. The humiliation angle comes from the idea that Cleveland realized too late that they were auditioning for SHEDEUR, not evaluating him. By the time that realization settled in, the momentum had already shifted. Fans started hearing that internal frustration grew, not toward SHEDEUR, but toward the organization's own inability to project confidence. The Ravens, meanwhile, were painted as calm and composed, letting the process breathe. In this rumor-driven version of events, the signing for seasons was not rushed or dramatic, but quiet and deliberate, which somehow made it feel even more devastating for the Browns. It suggested that Baltimore never doubted the outcome, while Cleveland never fully understood the stakes until it was over. What makes this speculation even more compelling is how it frames SHEDEUR Sanders as a symbol, rather than just a player. The story being told is not about one quarterback choosing one team, but about a generational shift in how young stars assert control. SHEDEUR's name carries expectations, and the rumor implies that he is fully aware of that power. The Browns, long haunted by instability at the position, were supposedly desperate to finally secure certainty. Instead, they became part of a cautionary tale. Insiders whispered that meetings felt tense, that conversations lacked alignment, and that SHEDEUR's camp quietly took notes. Baltimore, on the other hand, reportedly leaned into transparency, outlining how growth would look over for seasons without promising instant glory. That honesty, according to this speculation, was refreshing. The humiliation narrative deepens because it suggests Cleveland tried to sell hope without a clear plan, while Baltimore sold a plan without exaggeration. As fans debated online, the idea took hold that SHEDEUR never intended to embarrass the Browns publicly. But his decision alone did that. Silence, after all, can be louder than words. When the rumor of his long-term commitment to the Ravens solidified, it felt like confirmation that the Browns' approach had been fundamentally flawed from the start. By the time this story reached full volume, it had become less about contracts and more about identity. For seasons with the Ravens symbolized trust, patience, and mutual belief. At least in the speculative version being shared, Cleveland was left, in this telling, to confront uncomfortable questions about how it communicates vision to elite prospects. The humiliation was not in losing SHEDEUR Sanders, but in how predictable that loss appeared in hindsight. Every leaked comment, every unnamed source, reinforced the same theme. Baltimore spoke with clarity, Cleveland spoke with caution. For a quarterback raised around confidence and expectation, that contrast mattered. The rumor paints SHEDEUR as someone who listens more than he talks, who evaluates environments as carefully as playbooks. When he supposedly chose the Ravens, it was framed as a decision rooted in long-term thinking rather than short-term opportunity. Fans of Cleveland were left processing not anger, but disappointment, the kind that comes from realizing something was avoidable. Meanwhile, Baltimore supporters leaned into the narrative of smart planning and cultural consistency, whether true or exaggerated. This speculative story reshaped how people talked about both franchises, and that alone gave it staying power in the sports conversation. The second part of this rumor-driven saga dives even deeper into the emotional aftermath, especially from the perspective of league insiders, who thrive on reading between the lines. After the supposed agreement for seasons with the Ravens, conversations reportedly shifted from surprise to analysis. How did Cleveland let this happen? And why did Baltimore feel so inevitable in the end? The speculation suggests that SHEDEUR Sanders never viewed the decision as dramatic, but rather as logical. That framing is what hurts the Browns the most in this narrative. There was no chaos, no last-minute twist, just a steady pull toward an organization that matched his internal compass. Insiders began suggesting that Cleveland's front office felt blindsided, not because they lacked information, but because they misinterpreted confidence as compliance. SHEDEUR's calm demeanor was allegedly mistaken for acceptance, when in reality it masked careful evaluation. Baltimore's approach, described in whispers as respectful and patient, contrasted sharply with Cleveland's urgency. That urgency, according to the rumor, translated into pressure rather than persuasion. For a young quarterback used to controlling the moment, that pressure may have felt limiting. The humiliation theme resurfaces here as something quiet and internal, the realization that the Browns played their hand early. Meanwhile, the Ravens were content to wait, trusting that alignment would speak louder than promises. As the story continued to circulate, analysts and content creators began framing SHEDEUR Sanders as a new archetype of quarterback decision-making, not impulsive, not overly emotional, but strategic in a way that reflects modern player empowerment. In this speculative account, his for-season commitment to Baltimore was less about immediate starting opportunities and more about infrastructure. The Ravens were rumored to have emphasized coaching continuity, offensive adaptability, and long-term health, all without overselling. That restraint allegedly resonated deeply. Cleveland, by contrast, was painted as trying to accelerate certainty, pushing for reassurance before trust had fully formed. The humiliation here is subtle but sharp, being outmaneuvered without realizing a game was being played. Fans began to argue that the Browns did everything they thought was right, yet still lost the moment. That idea fueled frustration because it suggested the problem was philosophical, not tactical. Baltimore's calm confidence became the benchmark, and Cleveland's anxious ambition became the cautionary example. In the echo chamber of sports media, that contrast grew larger with every retelling, turning rumor into perceived truth. Before we dive in, Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Your support keeps us bringing you the latest news on the Baltimore Ravens. And hey, drop your take in the comments below. We want to hear from the flock. What truly amplified the speculation was how little SHEDEUR Sanders reportedly said throughout the process. Silence became his loudest statement. In this narrative, he allowed organizations to reveal themselves through action rather than words. The Browns, expecting feedback and affirmation, were met with neutrality. The Ravens, expecting nothing, continued to communicate openly. That imbalance, according to insiders, shaped the final decision long before any formal agreement. The four-season commitment was framed as evidence of mutual patience, not a rush gamble. Cleveland's humiliation, again, was internal. The slow realization that they had mistaken proximity for connection. Being close to securing a quarterback does not mean that quarterback believes in you. That lesson, repeated across talk shows and fan discussions, became central to the story. SHEDEUR was no longer just a prospect, but a mirror reflecting organizational culture. Baltimore liked what it saw in that reflection. Cleveland did not, whether exaggerated or accurate. This version of events resonated because it felt plausible in a league where perception often shapes reality. As emotion settled, the rumor evolved into a broader commentary on legacy and expectation. SHEDEUR Sanders carries a last name that commands attention, and the speculation suggests he is deeply aware of how every decision contributes to his long-term narrative. Choosing the Ravens for 4 seasons was framed as a move toward stability rather than spotlight. Cleveland, often associated with volatility, may have felt like a risk to that carefully managed story. The humiliation angle becomes almost tragic here because it implies the Browns wanted SHEDEUR for what he could fix, while Baltimore wanted him for what he could become. That difference matters to players thinking beyond immediate validation. Insiders began whispering that SHEDEUR valued environments where patience is not just preached, but practiced. Baltimore's history of calculated evolution fit that mindset. Cleveland's history of urgency, even when justified, worked against it. Fans on both sides debated whether this narrative was fair, but fairness mattered less than momentum. Once the story took shape, it carried its own weight, reinforcing itself with every retelling. In the final stretch of this speculative tale, the focus shifts to consequences. Cleveland, according to the rumor mill, was left to regroup, not just in terms of roster planning, but in self-evaluation. Losing SHEDEUR Sanders in this manner forced uncomfortable introspection about communication, confidence, and cultural identity. The humiliation was not public ridicule, but private reckoning. Baltimore, meanwhile, embraced the narrative of quiet competence, reinforcing its image as a destination for thoughtful players. The 4-season commitment became symbolic, a statement about long-term trust rather than instant gratification. Whether this story reflects reality or exaggeration, it captured something real about the modern league. Players are watching, listening, and choosing environments that align with who they are, not just what they can win immediately. SHEDEUR Sanders, in this rumor-driven account, became the embodiment of that shift. The Browns learned a hard lesson. The Ravens reaped the perceived reward, and fans were left dissecting every detail, every silence, every subtle signal. That is how rumors become legends, not through confirmation, but through resonance. That's it for this update. If you enjoyed the video and want to stay in the loop with exclusive news on our Baltimore Ravens, make sure to subscribe and hit that like button. We'd love to hear what the flock thinks. Drop your thoughts in the comments. See you in the next one.